Pronte? Buonasera. Buonasera a
Eccoci.
tutti, eccoci. Ciao Ornella.
Buonasera.
E buonasera a Jennifer Anton e Ernestina Meloni, benvenute.
Buonasera.
Ciao.
Grazie
Ciao.
per essere con noi questa sera. È una serata speciale perché abbiamo qualcosa che di solito non facciamo, cioè presentare un libro in inglese, però siamo all'Italian Bookshop e quindi giustamente diamo voce all'Italia in tutte le sue sfaccettature. Quindi questa sera abbiamo con noi Jennifer, che è un'autrice italo-americana, e che ci parlerà del suo primo romanzo, Under the Light of the Italian Moon, nel quale è andata a riscoprire le origini della sua famiglia, una storia di donne, di Jennifer. Ernestina è la nostra insegnante di riferimento per tutti gli insegnanti di italiano a Londra. Insegna italiano al Lycée Charles de Gaulle, è trustee della scuola italiana a Londra e è una nostra amica, quindi grazie per essere qui con noi.
Bravissime. Infatti è una serata particolare. Io sono particolarmente contenta che questa serata avviene nel mese di aprile, che è il mese che per noi italiani è denominato dal 25 aprile, il giorno della Resistenza. E in questo libro si parla molto di donne, si parla di guerra, si parla di come donne forti hanno combattuto in ogni caso contro quello che è stato il nazifascismo. Per cui è un libro perfettamente che si adatta perfettamente a questo mese di aprile, che per me è veramente il mese del 25 aprile. Vi ringrazio Jennifer, Ernestina, thank you so much to be with us today. So I will leave il palcoscenico alle due signore, a these beautiful ladies, e niente, noi cominciamo. Adesso noi vi lasciamo il tutto e ci vediamo fra un pochino e ci ascoltiamo.
See you later.
Ok.
Ciao.
Okay. Ciao, a dopo.
Bene, Jennifer, for me it's a great pleasure to be with you virtually. And as Ornella said, in this special month of April, 25th of April, the resistance, women, resistance, rebirth, beauty. But before we start deeply in your book, I'd like to ask you to tell us something in Italian, because as you know, as Italian teacher, I always treasure and appreciate the joy of listening somebody to talk in Italian.
Sì, sì. Buonasera a tutti. È un piacere essere qui con voi per condividere il mio primo romanzo, Under the Light of the Italian Moon, sotto la luce della luna italiana. Vorrei ringraziare Silvia e Ornella per avermi ospitato qui alla Liberia italiana. Il mio romanzo è ispirato a una vera storia di amore e resilienza della donna durante l'ascesa del fascismo e la seconda guerra mondiale. Segue Nina Argenta, figlia di una ostetrica di Feria Volanta e Coraggio, che si innamora di Pietro Pante, un ragazzo emigrato minatore nelle miniere di carbone di America. Nina vive sotto il governo fascista a Fonzaso, occupato dai nazisti, con la speranza di riunirsi al suo amato. Mi scuso per il fatto che non parlo abbastanza bene l'italiano per tenere l'intero incontro in italiano. Spero che mi perdoniate. Sono la nipote di emigranti. Mia nonna non avrebbe mai voluto lasciare l'Italia perché voleva restare con la sua famiglia. Ha sempre pensato e programmato di tornare indietro, ma non l'ha mai fatto. L'ho fatto io per lei. Attraverso questo libro spero così di essere riuscita a riportarla in Italia e a celebrare la sua vita e quella di tutte le donne che si sono sacrificate in silenzio. Grazie. I'm going to read quickly a little opening from my book before we get started in English. Okay? It all begins with women. In them, heaven and earth transfer. Creation comes to life, and all of humanity springs forth. In the mother's powerful womb, the transition from godly to worldly takes place. It was Mary who gave birth to eternity and redemption. The strength of the world is in its women. The power of the world is within its women. Yet it is the women we erase. Some women are unwilling to be forgotten or to forget, particularly if they are Italian. So that's the introduction into my novel, Under the Light of the Italian Moon. And I'm so proud to be here today to talk to you guys about it. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, Jennifer, you briefly said about your book, but can you tell us in more detail what it's all about? You're talking about your grandmother, but it goes back to even before your grandmother.
Yes, it's true. So the book is very much a story of two parts. So it's a love story. It's the story of Nina Argenta and Pietro Ponte. And it's the story of strong women and women's resilience during this rise of fascism in World War II. And Nina is the daughter of this very strong-willed Italian woman, this midwife known as La Capitana. She's such a strong woman. She's very well known and well respected in the town. And Nina falls in love with a boy who's migrating to America. And eventually they start a relationship, and this has to go on during the time where she stays behind to help with her mother. And ultimately during that time, in the backdrop, fascism is becoming more and more prevalent, and Mussolini is gaining more and more power, until finally Nina and Pietro lose contact. World War II ends up happening. Nazis occupy the town, and Nina has to try to survive in hopes that she can be with Pietro in the end. And so it's very much a love story. Very, there is a romance, but among all, it's really a story of strong women and the ties that really bind women together and how women survive.
Jennifer, why did you decide to write this novel now?
Well, I decided to write the novel actually in 2006. So it's been 14 years in the making. Basically, when I was young, I grew up in America. And, after we started studying World War II, I asked my grandmother, who was Italian, were you in Italy during this time? And did it impact you at all? And it was only then when I was, in my teens that she told me that she had lived in Italy and that Nazis had occupied her town. And she started to share with me some of the atrocities that had happened in their town and the impact on the family. But then I kind of forgot about it because you're a teenager and you don't worry about those things. And then when I was 29 years old and I was pregnant with my daughter, I decided I wanted to write down all these stories and get the answers from her. So I bought a notebook and I planned on asking her the questions, but unfortunately she ended up going into the hospital after my baby shower. And then when I had my daughter, I ended up going into heart failure. And 2 weeks later, she passed away. So she never got to meet my daughter. She never got to answer all those questions. And at her funeral, I saw my mother, who had, by the way, been trying to take care of me, trying to take care of my daughter, take care of her mother. I saw her become a nana. I saw her losing her mother. I saw my daughter coming into the world. And it was like this flash of womanhood and the strength of women, and particularly Italian women. And I just decided at that point I needed to get the answers one way or another, and I needed to discover what was behind all of this and learn more about my heritage.
Jennifer, you grew up outside Italy because I understood you grew up in the States.
Mm-hmm.
So what idea you had of Italy?
Yeah, I mean,
women.
what I knew about Italy, I mean, I definitely grew up an American kid. And, even my grandmother, my Italian grandmother, she seemed American to me, except for, the food, the polenta on Sundays, the risotto, the biscotti, lots of coffee, the threat of the wooden spoon, and a little bit of the swearing or the basta basta mangia mangia. These are the things that carry through even post immigration. So that was all I knew until that night when I asked her about it. She told me Fonzaso. That was the first time I had ever heard of the town in Belluno where she came from. It was only then that I heard that, and then slowly I became more interested as I got older, and then eventually got my Italian citizenship. Eventually started going to Italy, as a student, and then finally moving to Italy in 2012, moving to Milan, and ultimately then eventually buying a property in Italy. And now we go there, as often as we can. But it was hard because, I mean, I definitely didn't learn the language, as I mentioned. It was, when the immigrants came abroad, they were pressured to fit in. And if anything, there was, especially because of the war and the kind of the trading of sides, there was, there was the desire to raise their children as American and maybe not teach them the language. But that really could have broken the link back to Italy had I not written this book, actually.
Yes. You're mentioning the war, and you're mentioning Fonzaso that you discover only later on in your life. But how do you think Mussolini's policy has impacted in your family?
Mm-hmm.
And you must have figured out also that what was the role of women at the time? If you have any testimony from your grandmother and of the role of women at the time of Mussolini's.
Yeah. So it's funny because we knew so little of her life until I started researching it, until I find, after she passed away. Actually, at her funeral, we started hearing that she was really great at gymnastics and we were like, what? She did gymnastics? We had no idea. Well, of course, she was in the Balilla, and we had no idea of this. And so it was only afterwards that I sat down with my aunt, her sister, and started learning about, what their lives were like during that time. And then as I went deeper and started researching, not just from firsthand accounts, but then also the history underlying, knowing that my great grandmother was the daughter of a very strong-willed midwife who, was very formidably thought of in the town. Then when you overlay the stories that I was told about her, so things that had happened, for example, right before she passed away, basically a violation was brought against her because she was delivering a baby, and the mother passed away, and they basically blamed her for it. And there was just, I think really for midwives during that time of Mussolini, he was trying to control the fecundity of Italy. And so he was putting all these things in place that ultimately were trying to control midwives, trying to control women's fertility for the sake of the growth of the population. And so ultimately it would have been in the background in Rome, but it would have been definitely impacting the women. And of course, especially the women who were involved in bringing the babies, with Onmi coming in, with him putting in kind of, the policies to help the population grow, but ultimately trying to control women's bodies at the end of the day.
And keeping them at home. And the role was very, very specific. I read your book and I did enjoy the saga of all these women. And I wanted to ask you, I noticed that there is quite often the religious aspect of Catholicism and Virgin Mary coming through the voices of these women. What is the role of Catholicism and the Virgin Mary in particular in your book?
It's quite big, both from a symbolic perspective and just because in northern Italy, during that time, it's a very Catholic region, and also, if you go back, all of my ancestors wear the the Virgin Mary medallion all the way. You could look back through all the pictures going back. You can see everybody's wearing them. But I think, it stands for a few things in the book. One, she's always present in the sense that just because they are all Catholic. And in that particular, in Fonzaso, there are, the Blessed Virgin is a very important icon. There's actually a place where the women used to go to pray for their children. And it was kind of a thing to do, like the passeggiata, you'd go up there and you'd go pray. Right. It's very common. And now, and part of the story is that it used to be quite a small altar, but now there's a very large altar to St. Anne there. And actually part of that you find out in my book of how that got to be. And actually my family was involved in that, etc. But I think it's really that, one of the themes in the novel is that women create and men destroy. Yet women are the ones who are forgotten and men are the ones who are remembered. And I know it's provocative, but the reality is we're talking about a midwife who's helping bring so many babies into the world and women bringing life into the world. And they have no say of what's going on in Rome. And yet their men are being killed. Their children grow up to be killed by the Nazis, because ultimately Mussolini aligns with Hitler. We see their men be killed going off to war, and they don't have an equal seat at the table. And this is something that's relevant today. So, if you think, and I think it's also a question of what is the definition of strength? Is strength brute strength with muscles and guns, or is strength in softness, in flexibility, in what we bring as in creation? What's really the definition of strength? If you think about the Virgin Mary stepping on the snake with her bare foot, depleting evil, it's so symbolic. And I really think that we have a lot to explore in this territory. And I think it has a lot to say about feminism today too.
Yes, I just want to stop a little bit on the geographical position of Fonzaso, because you mentioned it. And for what I understood from the book, and the location is very unique in both wars. They had quite an intense presence from both sides. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, so Fonzaso is... It's basically up next to the Dolomites in Belluno, so very, very close to the Austrian border. So during World War I, they were occupied by Austrians and had a very difficult time, very awful times with that war. The war of snow and ice, basically, and the Alpini fighting up in the mountains. And then obviously with World War II, with the Nazi occupation, because ultimately when Mussolini was kind of ousted from Rome, obviously Germany embraced him and put him into Lake Garda and put him in charge of the Salo Republic, which was also that region. So it was very confusing, a lot of, mixed loyalties going on, a lot of very dangerous, everybody had to kind of keep a low profile, and it was a very difficult time. But if you think about it, my main character, Nina Argenta, she lived through both of those wars as a child for World War II, seeing her mother, do what she did during World War I, and then also as a woman in World War II.
Yes, it's true. I wanted to ask you something. What do you think is the difference now that you've been visiting Italy, rediscovering your roots and doing research? What do you think is the difference between those who left and emigrate and those who stayed?
Yeah, it's interesting because, as I said, I grew up, I was one of those generations forward from those who left. And those who left raised their children not speaking Italian, with some of the Italian traditions, but especially as their children married into other, nationalities, then it starts to get, blended, if you would. And really, most Americans still don't even have a passport. So a lot of, family members have never even traveled abroad, much less, considered their heritage. Whereas those who stayed, they raised their children speaking Italian. Some of them spoke English, but most of them speak Italian. And really that generation, that older generation, they were the link. They were the ones who would call each other on the phone and stay together. But without that group, there's the risk of completely severing that relationship. So I think they really lived, and started to live very separate lives. And so now I think you really have to make an effort. There has to be someone who's interested in reconnecting, really on both sides. But yeah, I think women, female wise, you know, I think ultimately when I went to Italy and I met my family there, you know, I did feel very embraced. I felt, yeah, I didn't feel like we had all that many differences as people, you know, I really didn't.
So clearly you decided to rediscover your roots, to do research. But what sort of research did you do?
Yeah. So it was 14 years of research because I was working full time, you know, not necessarily as a writer full time. I was raising my daughter and I was working in a corporate job. So I was researching in the background. So firsthand accounts, I interviewed people who had left. So 4 people who had moved to the US and Canada and 4 people who stayed in Fonzaso. And then beyond that, it was a lot of, so a few things. So one of the most important books that I used was a book by Victoria de Grazia called How Fascism Ruled Women. And that was critical because it really gave me a lot of insight into all the different facets of women's lives, midwives' lives, rural women's lives too. But then I went deeper. There's a book by Perry Wilson that talks about the Masai Rurali. So really focused on life in fascism for the rural women. And then there's several books about the war that were very good, and Mussolini by Richard Bosworth. So really going into his character as well. That was fascinating. I could have gone down a rabbit hole with that because there's a lot of interesting stuff about Mussolini. But then it was also reading a lot of fiction from the time. So Bassani and Moravia. And then there was a book called Unspeakable Women that was translated by Robin Pickering Iazzi, and it's actually stories written by women during the time of fascism. And so that was helpful just to make sure that I was not putting a modern mentality onto, you know, the people and the characters in the book. So that was very helpful. And then it was just a lot of, you know, there were PhD dissertations that I read about midwives in Italy that were helpful, you know, going to the church, sitting down with a priest, and, you know, they'd pull out all the books, and they don't care about GDPR. They just pull out, you know, the books and start showing you all the records, and it's like, you know, and everybody's crying, and so all of that. And yeah, I think the movie Two Women as well, you know, I sort of in 14 years, my mind, when I was thinking about the book, I was never, or when I opened my laptop, I wasn't in wherever I was in 1930s Italy, you know, that all of that was happening in my head basically.
And while you were doing your research and going through also personal memorabilia of your family, did you discover something that you didn't expect, that it pleases you or made you feel uneasy? Did you discover, or there is something more that you wanted to say? Or
one of the big surprises was, so I knew my great grandmother was a professionally trained midwife at the University of Padua. I knew that she had done that, but I learned some beautiful stories about her that made me just feel, you know, really moved by her faith and her strength as a woman who was able to kind of make space for herself. And when I say that, she was a robust woman. She made space for herself in a very, you know, very much a man's world. But her husband, I came to find out, and I figured he was a card-carrying fascist. But at one point, my cousin sent me a poster of Fonzaso and all the local fascists, and it's the picture of Mussolini on the top, and then it's got the creed, the fascist creed, and then pictures of all the members of the party in the region. And there, the third one in is my great grandfather. So this is the husband of the you know, very strong-willed midwife. So I started La Capitana. So I started thinking, gosh, what was that bedroom like? You know, and even today, you think where political tensions are so strong, even within families, it's an interesting thing to explore, people that might have different views on certain things, or why people choose to, you know, get behind something.
But you discover a lot also about your great grandmother, La Capitana, that probably is an inspiration to many women. I was fascinated by her character, must admit. And then, of course, Nina was a daughter, Elasia. but the Capitana is a timeless figure of women
Yeah,
that you hope there is something of her in each of us to face difficulties in life.
I
But
think so. I will
I
tell you, Ernestina, I really do feel truly that it was La Capitana who wanted this book done. I did feel like this past 2 years, it was her who was bullying me even from heaven. Like, I do really feel like she was the one who's like, get this done, Jennifer, get out of bed, make yourself coffee and get writing.
yes, you have a sense of direction and strength.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, now you are who you are with your experience. You are a mother, and you've been traveling. You left the States. You're in Europe. You're in UK, and you said you spent some time in Italy. And how do you, how important are your roots in shaping the woman that you are now?
I think, yeah, I mean, incredibly important. I mean, that moment 14 plus years ago now, where I sat, I didn't know what was happening with my heart. I didn't know what was happening with my life. I just saw my mother basically before my eyes change. I started seeing her completely differently. When I started writing this book, I was not, I wasn't even a mother yet. Well, I mean, I was, but I was pregnant, and I had no idea what it was like to be a woman who was a mother, a woman who had been married, and through these phases of raising a small child, all the way through to a teenager who all of a sudden could then critique your book or take care of you if you were sick, And so that, going through that, I ended the book when I was 43 years old. I finished when I was 43 years old. Nina, the main character, happens to be 43 years old when the book ends, and that was the natural end of the book, and it happened to work out that way. But I absolutely feel like as women, we do parallel our lives, and I mean that for women who choose and are able to be mothers, and as well women who don't choose or are not able to be mothers, because there's actually a character within my book who I may write the second book about, who explores womanhood from that side of things. And so yeah, I mean, I think it's incredibly important. I think it's really helped shape me, and I really feel like my grandmother was with me this whole time.
And now I'll come. I hope you don't mind. I'll come to your daughter, because not many people know that the reason why I met you is because I'm the teacher of Italian of your daughter.
Yes.
And to me, to be able to pass tradition and to give the testimonio to young people of the wisdom and the beauty of strong women of the past, of the present, is extremely important. So my question to you, and I said to Viviana, you must be present, because I'm going to name you, because I have lost faith in you. And this is also for you. So I'm going to ask you, what is the legacy that you want to pass to your daughter, coming where you come from, with your extremely interesting and spatial history, which I think is very common to women of family of immigrants, but not only immigrants. We all have our own history of resiliency, of assertiveness, of desire to be known. So what is the legacy you want to pass to your daughter?
Yeah, I think, and Sheila, we're lucky to have you as a teacher. Certainly. I remember when you gave Vivian a project to share her history, and she was able to really easily share it all, because I've been doing all this work. So it's amazing. But her Italian's really coming along, so it's good. But no, I want to teach, I would like her to take away really the power of women, just our true power, and own her power, and also really strive to push for more and for better, because I don't think that we can be satisfied with where we are. We haven't come far enough yet. We haven't solved the problems that were happening in the book. We're still struggling with those things. So my legacy would be to keep pushing and to really embrace her power as a woman, and really take her place in the world, make space for herself in the world, and make space for other women in the world. And always remember her mother, of course. And all the women that came before her.
And to improve her Italian so that she's able to go from one word to the other and be able to see the beauty of diversity and differences. And by all means,
but I do think she's been, I've been lucky that she's been with me this whole time. She's been, she was 2 years old the first time we went. And she sat at these tables as I've been interviewing all these people, and she's watched me take my notes, and she's watched me working at my computer, after a long day at work and doing all these things. So I think she's also seeing what it means to be committed to and she's been such an integral part of this whole project.
Well, that's so, is another woman in the list of the people we have been encountering. I personally, I read the book. I read it in English because there is only the English version. I'll be very happy one day to see the translation in Italian.
Yes,
and I recommend the book because it's so nice to be able to explore our past and to explore also difficult moments like immigration, our history, the fascism. As you said, nobody knew much about it and nobody talks about it. And so to discover through the encounters of our relatives or little stories, tell letters or something we find out through the priest of Fonzaso is fascinating. So I personally recommend the book, and it will be a pleasure to read it in Italian.
Yes, well, maybe somebody listening, works for an Italian publisher. We're proactively right now looking for an Italian publisher because there is a lot of interest, and certainly it needs to happen. I mean, the people of Fonzaso, I'm speaking with all of them on Sunday, and we have a translator, etc. But it really needs to happen. It's their story, it needs to happen, and it needs to be translated into Italian. I mean, this is historical fiction. To be clear, it is biographical fiction based on the lives of inspired by true stories. But there's a lot of true stories within it, and a lot of stories that need to be remembered within it.
And if I'm not wrong, you already met other women, other organizations, and today you have also a podcast with American women. How do you feel about all this sharing, talking, comparing?
Yeah, it's the best part of it. It's the best part of it, right? Because if we can instigate, if you go to my website, jenniferanton.com, there's a book club discussion guide. And I think it instigates a lot of important questions. So if you read the book first, Under the Light of the Italian Moon, and then download for free the discussion guide on the website. But if you do that, I think if we can start these little conversations to talk about women and their strength and their power and remembering women, especially last month was International Women's Month. I think, if we can start to do that, then we can start to actually make change and have a new way of looking things today. So I love having these conversations because it helps to remember all these women, and hopefully it helps inspire other people also to talk to older women and ask them, what were you like when you were a child? What were your dreams before you were a mother? I'm hoping that this inspires conversations like that over coffee or wine.
Absolutely. Or wine. I'm not sure how it's going to be organized for questions, but I'll invite people if they want to put their own questions and in the Facebook. I'm not very technical, but okay. I let Martina to check and to organize that in case if there are questions or curiosity or things want to be said.
Sure.
Okay.
We wanted to suggest Jennifer, if you want to read us maybe the beginning of the book, or I mean whichever part you feel like sharing with us.
Okay. Well, I read I read kind of the opening, but you want me to read a little bit more? Oh goodness. Okay.
Yes, I mean anything that it's always very nice to
Yes.
hear the author reading
Okay.
its own book.
I'll look for another section. Hold on. I want to find a special section that's one of my favorite parts. Okay. One second. Sorry.
It's okay.
It's okay. It's okay.
I'm just trying to find the right size. So, okay.
Thank you so much, Ernestina, by the way.
Okay.
Yeah, by the way, I was just checking the message, and my friend from near Belluno knows Fonzaso, Jennifer.
Amazing.
Yes, and she's listening to you right now. So she's very pleased to be able to listen to you. And ciao, Lydia. I say just ciao.
Ciao, yes. Ciao. Okay, here's another little section. Here I go. Ready? Did you learn to dance like this in America? She asked as he spun her and then pulled her back close to him. I've learned a lot of things in America. He leaned towards her and changed the subject. Do you ever go to the movies? He asked. When he spoke to her, he had to get close to her ear so she could hear him over the band. She felt the heat from his breath on her neck. Si, in Feltre, and we were meant to get a small picture house behind the church soon. I especially love American films. Pietro grinned at her, searching her face as if memorizing her features. Why weren't you at the last festa? I saw everyone else in your family, but not you. Onorina was the star of the night. I'm sure she was, Nina frowned, a chill going through her at the mention of her sister. I had to help my mother. Babies don't plan around events, she said, breathless and annoyed that the conversation had headed once again in Onorina's direction. How many times had men tried to get information about her sister through her? Was Pietro the same? Do you want to be a midwife too? It was a serious question to ask in the middle of a dance floor, but his brown eyes made her want to share her thoughts with him. I want to matter to the world, she admitted. My mother has figured out how to do that. He spun her again, then looked at her seriously. You do, and you will, he said. Un colpo di fulmine. The lightning bolt returned as his words sunk into her, like she had been waiting to hear them all her life. So that's a little of the romance and a little bit of the flavor.
Yeah. We need some romance, no?
Yeah,
always we need romance.
But I love that.
I love that scene. To speak about the strong women because this is a very, very important issue, I think. Yeah. And as I told you, for me, April is for the 25th of April. That is the Giorno della Resistenza. And this year's the bookshop and with other organization, we are going to celebrate, and we are going to celebrate women for the 25th of April. Yes. I spoke just yesterday with AMPI and with all the other organization. And your book is perfect because there are very strong women. Yes.
Yes.
And it's always
April 25th is a very important thing that happens in the book, actually. April 25th, 1945. There's a very, it's basically what I found out about in, that night I found out about Fonzaso. I found out about April 25th, 1945.
Yeah, yes, it's a very important date.
It's an important date.
Celebrate. Yeah, because the memory is very, very important. We have not to forget this, so that we have to remember what happened on the 25th of April.
Exactly. It's also important not to disregard our elderly people, but to treasure our grandmothers and great grandmothers, but to treasure their experience because they're good teaching for us. We live in a society that everything has to be perfect, everybody has to be elegant, young, and quick and pretty, but in reality, life is based on experience that other people did before us.
It's true.
Absolutely.
our
Absolutely.
mothers,
Yes.
grandmothers, great grandmothers. And,
When I spoke to those older people, I would sit across from them, and I did not see them, with age spots and gray hair and glasses. What I saw was who they were as my characters in my book, and who they were when they were young. And I think, too often we don't do that. We only see what's in front of us. Maybe a grandma in a house coat with the rolled down, stockings around her ankles or what have you. You don't see the woman and what she did and how she lived and all those parts of her. And I think you're right. We need to hold on to them while they're here and get the stories from them before they pass.
Yeah. Okay. And I hope it's going to be a translation in Italian.
Yes.
Because
let's hope so.
We do a proper presentation at the bookshop in Italian. No?
In Italian.
I want that. We need to find an Italian publisher. We're working on it, and maybe somebody who's listening tonight knows somebody and they can reach out. So, if you go to my website, jenniferanton.com, my email address, you can get to me through that. And, there's actually a free excerpt of the book as well. If they want to download it and read that, they can get it there.
Okay. And it was a beautiful evening. And I want to thank you very, very much, Jennifer. Ernestina, you are in my heart, as usual.
Thank you. Thank you, Ornella. Thank you, Ernestina. Grazie mille.
Grazie. E
Grazie a voi.
soprattutto alla nostra Martina, che senza di lei non facciamo niente. Okay,
Grazie, Ornella.
Perfetto, grazie Martina.
Grazie a voi.
Grazie mille, ciao.
Scusate,
È stato un piacere.
Saluta mamma!
Scusate.
Ok, allora vi salutiamo. Ciao a tutti, buona serata.
Buona serata.
Ciao.
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 Ciao. Bye.
Ciao.